Okay, welcome back to the Tea Symposium here at the Victoria Tea Festival Revival here in our 10th year. I'm Jared Nyberg. I'm here with my guest today. I'm super stoked to have, we have Lovena Harvey, who's owner of the Gathering Place Trading Company, both existing on Cortez and Campbell River. Is that my understanding?
We founded on Cortez Island and our manufacturing facilities in Campbell River.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah, and I'm just so interested in this topic that we're going to be going into today. Like, I've been really studying a lot about enzymatic oxidation because, of course, we talk about it a lot in tea, and you have such an awesome history of working with Rooibos, and there's this excellent sort of parallel of how some of these techniques work out, and I wanted to explore and understand a little bit about that flavor transformation. Mm-hmm. But before that, you're probably going to tell us a little bit about maybe your background and who you are, and we can kind of take it from there. Does it sound like a good idea?
Sounds great.
Okay, all right.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Or is it still morning? I think it's still morning. My name's Lovena Harvey, and I'm co-owner and co-founder of Gathering Place Trading. We founded our company in 2003. We were living on Cortez Island at the time. We still do. But we've moved our business now to Campbell River. So we're a Canadian family-owned company that sources organic teas directly from countries around the world and spices. And we try to only we try to only support family farms or cooperative farms, and we go directly, so we have that direct relationship. But our story didn't begin in Canada, it began in South Africa, and it began with a cup of Rooibos tea.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
So how long ago was that?
That was in 2003.
2003,
yeah.
Okay.
So our story begins in 2003 when my husband Ryan and myself and two of our children were traveling in a 1972 VW camper van around South Africa. And one afternoon in the Cedarburg Mountains, we got lost. And fate landed us on the doorstep of France and Gerda, van der Westenhuizen, in a small town called Kraftwater, and they are third generation Rooibos farmers. And so when we arrived at the farm, without hesitation, they invited us in, not knowing who we were at all. And they offered us a cup of Rooibos. And it turned out that that cup of Rooibos was unlike anything we had ever tasted. It was rich, smooth, slightly sweet, full of life. And I had been drinking Rooibos for my 2 pregnancies, and at that point, I had a third one that also I drank a ton of Rooibos, and so I was used to tasting Rooibos, but this was unparalleled Rooibos. So we were so moved that we asked if we could bring the tea to Canada, and they agreed. And over the next several months, we chatted with them repeatedly, and we ended up requesting an unorthodox trade because when we arrived on the farm doorstep, they fell in love with our camper van. It was a really cool 1972 VW, and so we ended up agreeing to trade our camper van for a ton of tea. So that is how our company was founded.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, so at the time we were organic farmers, and we were called Gathering Place Organic Farms, so we just became Gathering Place Trading Company.
Did they drive you to the airport and then take the VW, or did they?
No, how did that work? I can't even remember, but somehow we...
Just thinking about the logistics here. Okay, this is pretty awesome, but I hope you didn't take the ton and walk it to the airport.
We did not.
Okay,
we were too scared to bring 1,000 kilos of tea to Canada when we didn't even have a business here yet.
Yeah, amazing. Cool.
Yeah, we kind of had to beat the tea home. We sent only 200 kilos, and France, the farmer, he wrote us a promissory note for the remaining 800 kilos in Afrikaans. We still have that piece of paper. It's pretty cool. And he said he would forward the rest of the 800 kilos once we got settled back in Canada, and we had actually created a company. Right. So we did that.
Yeah.
And the rest is history, as they say.
Super cool.
So over time, we've come to know Franz and Gerda really deeply. Franz holds a PhD in botany.
Okay.
So he's an incredible steward of the land. Well, not just because of that, but in addition to being an expert in his field.
And may I just, that cup of tea that you had, that first one that just kind of blew your mind.
Yeah.
You said you'd had Rooibos through your 2 pregnancies, but this one was extra special because it was full of, do you think it was just made differently than any way you'd ever had it made, as well as just the quality level? And if I was to going to link, I know we're going to go through this, but just is it you were just tasting really good process, or what do you think, looking back on that now, was grabbing your attention so much that it inspired your work?
Yeah, thank you for asking. That's a great question. I think it was because just of the quality of the Rooibos. So up until then, I had only drank just supermarket Rooibos from supermarkets in South Africa.
Okay. So tea bags.
Because Ryan's family, my husband's family, lives in South Africa. We had just bought, and no offense to Fresh Pack, but Fresh Pack is a common brand in South Africa, and it's just kind of like the average tea, and it may have been stored in a silo or a warehouse for years, and they don't take like the care and the craftsmanship.
I call tea bags a bit of an unhappy accident. Because I don't want to say that, and it sounds horrible, but it's just, I think it just changed a lot of the way that we drink tea.
Yeah.
My understanding is that silk sachets were packed with tea, sent back to England, and then they were just mistakenly dunked into water and made into tea, and that's how it started. And then it turned into a thing, and it's a whole industry. In their defense, they're quite convenient.
Yes.
But I think there's a bit of smoke and mirrors, because what ends up happening is it'll feel cheap, but that's because there's 1.25 grams in them, or there's just such a small amount of tea in there, processed quite finely, so that you get more extraction out of it. But it can be problematic, and when you do compare that to somebody making a craft beverage, it's like night and day, right? Suddenly you have texture, you have richness, you have warmth, you have life, like you were talking about. And I imagine they were doing the full leaf extraction.
Oh, absolutely.
And may have been one of, or the first time that you had it that way, is my understanding.
Yeah, I think it was probably the first time I had ever had loose leaf Rooibos.
And a much higher dose than you'd have in the tea bag, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And for me, I've had the Rooibos from you and from others, but I in particular love what Franz and Gerda produce for you, and I think it's amazing that you found them. But sorry, I interrupt.
Yeah, and we found them, like I said, by chance.
Okay.
Yeah. So so just a little bit about the way that Franz farms. So he farms regeneratively, but long before this term became popular, now you hear it all the time. Regenerative farming, but. So he builds swales to slow the water across the slopes. He digs reservoirs for rainwater storage for during the dry seasons.
Okay.
And then he harvests gently from the same plants year after year, whereas many of the Rooibos farmers, they're harvesting the plants every year, or maybe every second or third year, which is causing desertification of this really delicate semi-arid ecosystem where the Rooibos grows.
And once it's gone, it's gone.
Once it's gone, it's gone. Yeah.
And regenerative farming, I'm one of, apparently it's a buzzword, but I don't know what it means. I assume it means being able to just use the same land and keep giving back to it so that it keeps producing. Is that? If you were going to define it.
I would say it's more closed loop. It's really looking at the whole ecosystem. It's building the soil and improving the soil, whereas traditional farming depletes the soil, and then you need to add fertilizers, or you need to add, other amendments to the soil. But he's not adding any amendments to his soil. Rooibos is incredibly deep-rooted, and so it brings up all the minerals from the subsoil.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So he, as I say, he harvests gently from the same plant every year, and he really protects this fragile semi-arid ecosystem from erosion and desertification. So I feel like his care of the land is exemplified in the flavor of the Rooibos.
You really can taste that, because you do. Do you ever, to this day, compare it against other Rooibos, and you confirm to yourself that this is just awesome stuff? Because I've done that, and I'm like, time and time again, very impressed with their
Yeah.
work. So
Yeah, no, I'm always quite shocked that of what some of the other rooibos out there taste like.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when you go to tea shops, and
Yeah.
again, no offense to tea shops, but often the rooibos is flavored with like flavorings
Yeah.
instead of just with spices and goodness. And anyways,
and and flavoring tea is definitely a thing.
yeah,
I'm personally very
absolutely.
interested though in the unique characteristics of unflavored teas that are
Mm-hmm.
just brought about through things like good production techniques. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So just a little bit about Rooibos. So of course it is not from the black tea plant. It's actually a legume. It's known as Aspalathus linearis.
Okay.
And so this leguminous plant is incredibly unique to South Africa. So Rooibos means red bush in Afrikaans, and it's known as a fynbos. And so fynbos is wild bush. Fyn is wild in Afrikaans. Of which there are 12,000 species in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
And that's in just the kind of Cape area. So that is known as the Cape Floral Kingdom, and it's one of the biodiversity hotspots in the world.
Oh, wow.
And there's 6 biodiversity hotspots, and of the 6, it's the smallest and the richest in the world. It has more species of fynbos than or more biodiversity than any of those biodiversity hotspots. So Rooibos grows in one small region of South Africa, the Cedarburg Mountains, and it's the only place in the world it grows, and it grows in an area of like 200 to 300 square kilometer area. And that's it. But Rooibos is prepared and enjoyed like black tea, and its processing has surprising similarities, especially when it comes to the enzymatic oxidation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are people familiar with what that means, enzymatic oxidation? Because we're talking about an enzyme. It's polyphenol oxidase, generally with tea, that's used to darken the leaves. And where you pause that enzyme's work, it is often one of the various factors that are going to help attribute that to a particular tea genre. So green teas, yellow teas, white teas, red teas, blue teas, black teas, a lot of times just where they sit in that kind of color spectrum is somewhat defined by where we do what's called kill green. So we deactivate that enzyme that's browning the leaves. To make a green tea, for example, you would heat the leaves up past 80 degrees centigrade within 23 hours of harvest, and that's going to give you a green tea because you've deactivated the enzyme before it's browned the leaves. You go into, say you want to make yourself oolong, you're going to go all the way to withering the leaves until they lose about 20% of their moisture and darken a little bit, and then you're going to do the kill green, which is again bringing it past 80 degrees, and that's going to kill that enzyme. So how you manage and manipulate that enzyme during the oxidative production process is going to help to make a really define where that tea is. It's a bit of a gray area, but that's how we're defining. It's the same plant that makes white teas, yellow teas, green teas, blue teas, red teas, black teas. But it's control over that enzyme and passive and active oxidation.
Yeah. So basically, another word for enzymatic oxidation is fermentation.
This is, I always tell people that, like, I disagree. Like, I'm just like, I don't think it's true fermentation because I know that there's true, so true fermentation to me involves a bacteria.
Right.
So, if I'm going to do, like, kombucha or sourdough or yogurt, right, like, there's some inoculant. I mean, obviously, when you let something sit and it's wet, there's going to be a little bit of fermentation happening. But I think that
it's not fermentation in the pure sense.
Whereas oxidation is just like a development of a breakdown of the cell walls. It's like a decay. And fermentation does contribute to oxidation. But I don't think they're one and the same. Yeah.
Okay, fair.
Anyway, that's just an opinion. But
well, I guess it's sometimes like easier when people are like, "What is oxidation?" It's just totally. It's like the changing of the plant. So
sure.
So in Rooibos, this natural reaction happens when enzymes in the plant cell are exposed to oxygen after the leaf is cut or bruised. So basically, the Rooibos comes from the field as a green plant, and it comes in these bundles, and they quickly get them back to the kind of manufacturing area because it will start to change
course.
color just when it's bundled. And then they put it through a chipping machine. And
It's bark that we're working with, right? It's not like leaf
well,
or fruit or anything.
it's needle-like leaves.
Needle-like
yeah.
leaves. Oh,
So
interesting.
the closest thing that that I would compare it to here would be like a Scotch broom plant.
Yeah, they're genetic relatives, right?
Yeah, because it's a legume as well.
Right.
And so it's kind of got needle-like leaves, and then there is some twiggy sticks, especially at the base. But when they're harvesting the rooibos, they're harvesting this year's growth, and so they're kind of taking, like probably bundles about or growth about this big. They're cutting it. They stick it between their knees as they harvest, and they work their way down the row until they have a bundle about this big, and then they wrap it in like a kind of like a little burlap sack and tie it, and then they put those bundles into the truck, and then they bring the bundles to the warehouse. Then they line up these bundles on a conveyor belt that heads towards the chipper, and then they kind of expertly put it through this chipping machine, and it spits out then this very green chlorophyll-y small leaves. They then will take that out onto the drying pans, and they put it into a long windrow.
Okay.
And I remember the very first time I saw this happen, 20-something years ago, the thing that surprised me was they then wet the tea.
Right.
I was like, wow, why would you wet tea after you dry it? But it's because of the oxidation process that they're doing that. And so then they wet the pile, and it's in a nice, neat kind of long windrow. They cover it with burlap sacks, and then they leave it overnight. So there's a lot of heat developed there. Oh, one thing that I didn't mention is our farmer, he waits until the hottest days. There has to be 3 days
really
where
hot.
the temperature is 40 degrees Celsius or more, and then that gives him the signal that he can harvest. Whereas, and we look on other farms, and other people are already harvesting, but he waits until it gets hot, and then harvests the tea. So there's a ton of heat locked into those plants.
That's really interesting, because there's two things that are paralleling tea here, right? One is like in yellow tea, the whole piling and then putting blankets over top is a really important part of making yellow tea.
Okay.
And then another thing that's really interesting is just this concept of passive and active oxidation. So active oxidation is literally like mauling it or crushing it or like doing all these things to it. But another important part is just passive oxidation. So managing the room, how warm it is, how moist it is, just sort of your ambient environment and how that impacts things. So it looks like there's two very clear parallels there already. This kind of piling process and this and the blanket thing. That's more of like an active involvement, and then he's also waiting for that temperature to kick in for that right moment. And they talk about pre-Qingming in China, and they're harvesting at sometimes it's not ready. They're harvesting it before a particular date because it's going to get them a better price.
Okay.
But the really good farmers, in my opinion, wait until the tea is ready.
Uh-huh.
So in this case, it's assessing that
Yes.
and making sure that it's ready, and that's going to involve that heat spell.
Yeah, which of course is like also the most uncomfortable time to be out there in the fields. Like you can't
Over 40.
Yeah, you can't even step in the sand. It's so hot, with bare feet.
Sure.
So chipping, putting in a pile, wetting the pile. It's bright green. Cover it with burlap sacks. And then that probably is happening at around, noon, let's say.
Okay.
And then that is, one extra step they do before the burlap sacks is they run over it with a tractor.
Really?
Tractor
Wow.
tires.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, but that tractor is only on the drying pans. The only
Okay,
thing
so
the tractor is used for. A special,
what do we call that?
special small
Yeah,
tractor
yeah.
that is used
Dedicated.
to bruise.
That's the word.
Dedicated, is used to bruise the leaves, and so they brew. That's what really makes then the leaves get bruised,
That's
and
that
then
maceration, like in tea as well.
and then they rake it back into the pile. So bruise it, then cover it overnight, and when we get out there at 6 a.m. the next morning, it is completely red.
Yeah,
The whole
that's so
pile
cool.
is red. So overnight, green to red, and then they have a machine where they go along and it sprays the tea
Again.
out onto the drying pans.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
so it's like the tractor scoops and sprays the tea out. So then there's a thin layer covering the
Sure.
drying pans.
Kind of a mechanization of something that was probably quite arduous in the past.
Yes, that they would have had to do it all by hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the tea dries just for that day,
Cool.
and then by the end of that day,
Mm-hmm.
it's brought back into the manufacturing plant. It is steam sterilized at that point.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Steamed and then dried again, or
I think that I actually don't know that process intimately, but they
Okay.
do have. It's just like what they're required to do for
see.
export.
I see.
They're required to like pass it through because it's been outdoors, and it's like what makes the export. Because it's very controlled, the Rooibos export industry, as you can imagine, because they want to maintain
Sure.
the status of the Rooibos industry in South Africa. So so it's
are there like sort of maximum licenses that are allowed and this kind of control like you see in the wine industry or the tea industry in Taiwan? Like, or is anybody just allowed to go and buy property in Rooibos in Cedarburg and
well, I
harvest
think
Rooibos?
that would be the issue, would be finding the area where the Rooibos actually grows. Yeah.
Yes. Certain countries have certain of limitations on who's allowed to do it to sort of, maintain quality control standards and also to prevent oversaturation of the market.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and then just a little bit about Rooibos, because I didn't mention about the fact that Rooibos is caffeine-free. It's really high in minerals and antioxidants. It's safe to drink for all people, pregnant women, children, and even infants. In fact, in South Africa, it's a well-known cure for colic in babies. And so, like, for hundreds of years, people have been using it
Really good for breathing,
in babies' bottles. So it's and why it's so good for colic is it contains quercetin, which is a potent flavonoid and antioxidant, which has anti-inflammatory, antihistamine, and antispasmodic properties.
I have heard many asthmatics who benefit from making Rooibos part of their regime.
Yeah. And the minerals, Rooibos has calcium, magnesium, zinc, phosphorus, iron, potassium, and because it's a legume, it's incredibly deep-rooted, so it's bringing up all those nutrients from the subsoil.
Very mineralizing. Yeah. Well, that's really cool.
Yeah, so what have I not talked about yet?
I love just the whole connection to red teas, though. Just that browning. Like when you were talking about it, when I was in Mandokoro, I helped some farmers make some red tea or black tea that we call in North America.
Can you tell me about red tea? I don't know.
Well, red tea is black tea. So
Okay.
so red tea is called red tea at origin, but when the English started selling it, they renamed it black tea. But black tea already existed, so we have to call it dark tea. So at origin, what we call black tea is called red tea or crimson tea.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's the same thing. And what it is it's just that enzymatic oxidation, but taking it all the way to it's lost around 80% of its moisture before they do the kill green process, before they deactivate the enzyme.
Okay.
A lot of times this is done through pan firing to get that heat.
Yeah.
But when they crush it, which is similar, they have they call it, I don't know the name in English, but it's called a junenki in Japanese. And it's
Okay.
like a unit that has like a big weight and it like crushes the leaves.
Yeah.
And then they take those leaves and they put them into sort of into a room with ambient temperature and humidity control.
Yeah.
And that's going to get it a number of hours in there after it's been crushed. And the same thing happens, this kind of rusting of the leaf. Like suddenly it comes out of there and it's so red. It's really cool.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. And then they bake it off to like give it a toasting, almost like a firing. It'd be cool to fire Rooibos.
Yeah.
Okay, like to roast it a bit.
Yeah, it would be. But that's interesting because, as a red, Rooibos means red bush, and so a lot of people call it red tea. And, the, has anyone read the Alexander MacLeod books? Is that his name? No, maybe that's the ones of the detective in Botswana, and she's always drinking red tea, red bush tea. Anyway, so I've often found it confusing that black tea is called red tea,
Sure.
because everybody calls Rooibos red
yeah.
tea.
It's called red tea at origin because the color of the extraction.
Right.
It's this beautiful amber, this red. Some of them are really noticeably crimson in color.
Okay.
And it's about that liquid color post-extraction rather than the color of the leaf itself. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Yes, so as I mentioned, Rooibos is naturally caffeine-free, so that's why people love it, because it brews like this dark, rich color, so you
Sure.
can have it with milk and sweetener like you would a black tea. So some people that are regular Rooibos buyers say, you know, I'm the person that doesn't like tea, but I like Rooibos.
Sure.
And yeah, you can have it with milk and sweetener if you so desire. Also, it's deeply rooted in South African culture. It's been around as long as time. And we had a brief little discussion about like the actual fermentation, oxidation process of Rooibos, and whether that was, colonial, founded by the Dutch who settled South Africa, or whether it was.
Because I was misinformed that there was green Rooibos, and then the Dutch brought tea processing techniques, and what you were correcting me and saying, no, that's actually this style of processing Rooibos, this kind of green version, and this enzymatically oxidized version are both indigenous to the country and have existed for, more. I wonder how long.
I would say thousands of years.
Since time immemorial.
Yeah. Because there was the Khoi people that were there. There was the San people that were there. Eventually, those tribes commingled and they became the Khoi San, and they were the desert kind of dwellers, or who lived in the semi-arid ecosystem. And there's much proof that they always harvested the Rooibos and just pounded it and left it overnight to turn it into the red Rooibos. So I think that they would drink it both green and red. And that actually does also bring up another point, which, so there is such a thing as green Rooibos, and so green Rooibos is, we call unfermented Rooibos, or non-oxidized Rooibos. And so basically when they want to make the green Rooibos, they take those bundles straight from the field and rush them back to the warehouse in even half truckloads sometimes, because they don't want that oxidation to start. And then they chip it, and then they spray that out onto the drying pans, and then it's dried and it's locked as green. And the green is higher in antioxidants, higher in minerals, because it hasn't gone through that oxidation
totally
process.
Green tea. I mean, in Japan, it's like 95% green tea production, and they actually have fans in the back of the trucks that are blowing air on the leaves, and then they bring them and they drop them off at the factory, and there's all these powerful fans just blowing the tea constantly, just trying to prevent that redding, because redness in a green tea is a flaw, right?
Right.
So that's interesting that I wonder how many plants there are out there that have either had this kind of traditional interaction where they're doing this kind of enzymatic oxidation, and not just, because there's a very simple process where a person could harvest an herb and do a very passive drying, and that's going to be beautiful. It's going to be great. But it's so interesting, the kinds of flavor complexity that you can achieve through this crushing and this, hitting it with, say, like a little bit of water, or like rolling it a bit, or firing it and letting it kind of rest, and then, coming back. And I wonder also just how a person goes about improving that. Have you seen, for example, in the world of Rooibos, have you seen Franz and Gerda just have a very consistent product from year to year, or do you see that it just gets better and better? And if so, how are they achieving that?
Yeah, I think it is a very consistent product, because they are third-generation farmers themselves, now passing it on to their son, fourth-generation farmer. So they themselves have been doing this for more than 50 years.
Amazing.
And then their four mothers before that. In fact, the house that they live in, because it gets so hot in South Africa, the walls are about this thick, and when you walk through the doors, you kind of have to duck to walk through the doors. I think people used to be smaller, so it's like the original house from 2 generations previous. I should also mention, because it's something that's really important to us, the fair trade nature of the tea. So In order for a tea to be considered fair trade in South Africa, it needs to be grown by indigenous peoples
Okay, I didn't know
and
that.
to be processed by indigenous peoples. But we know, because we've known France and Gerda for 22 years, we know that they actually loaned the money to the Indigenous Tea Cooperative for them to buy their first tractor. We know that they actually do all the processing of the fair trade tea because they don't have the facilities to do it, and they even lease some of their land for the fair trade tea to happen
wow.
on their property. So they're very enmeshed in the upliftment and betterment of the local community, which we super appreciate. And and they of course provide housing and schooling and all of those things
really
that we always look for when we're looking for partners.
Sure.
They kind of ticked all the boxes, which is probably why we fell in love with them 23 years ago.
Whenever I'm looking for a connection, it's always real people that are actually getting their hands dirty in the soil and participating in the process, and ideally have family going back that have been doing it for a long time. It just seems to make a big difference, and that's not always the norm. It's by far not the norm, right? The norm, I think, is going to be a lot bigger operations, suit and tie, telling people what to do, and then just, and you can have some pretty cool operations within that world where they're careful about certifications and treating people well and proving it with, all of these different things. But it's nice when you can have, they're helping out the local community. Is it a huge operation? Is it a fairly medium-sized? How would you describe what they're doing?
Like their operation?
Yeah.
I would say in the Rooibos world, it's probably one of a bigger farm, because they've been doing it for so long, and and so they own quite a lot of land, and because it's this particular area where the Rooibos grows, it's hard to grow in other places. So I would say that in the scheme of things, but you don't have that feeling when you go there. When you go there, it feels very mom and pop, and we have we have a barbecue with them, and I remember being like, where does this lamb come from that we're eating? And they're like, over there, and there's some sheep on the other side of the fence. Is where they're pointing at. So they're very sustainable, and and we're just it feels very homey and and very family like.
Have you ever seen them experiment with their different with other plants? Has anybody ever taken this process for making Rooibos and used it for maybe other varieties of the plant? You said there's 1,500 or more, or maybe any other botanicals that they're working with and applying a similar production technique to? Or is it a major focus on Rooibos and not really doing these kinds of experiments?
Yeah, so those folks, they only do Rooibos, but this exact same process of enzymatic oxidation happens with honeybush tea.
Right, of course.
And so in honeybush, there's a little bit more of a story there. There's 4 different varieties of honeybush, with the most superior variety being the wild mountain honeybush.
Sure.
And so largely the wild mountain honeybush, which is the one that we sell, it grows only
why is it superior?
Wild crafted. Well, I believe that it's a wild crafted plant exclusively. So of course, when something grows just wild in its natural environment, it's in its premium location that the plant chose to grow there and has chose to grow there from time immemorial. Yeah. And so I think that that natural selection process quite possibly makes it so superior. But also, it just really is the flavor profile of that wild mountain honeybush. It's
when you compare it, it's like night and day again.
I mean, maybe you would have to be more of have drunk honeybush for a long time to kind of really be able to really taste the difference, but I sure do. And I think it's also elevation. It's grown at a higher elevation, which then just, I think, makes for a finer plant.
They've proven this in lab studies too, that higher elevation of a similar cultivar or variety is going to create a greater concentration of volatile oils and really interesting flavor complexity. Slowing down the growth of a plant is really good for flavor development.
Okay.
So you get like non-irrigated olive oil, or you get these, these teas growing at really high elevations, or maybe off of the tea belt where they're growing in a little bit of a different area. It's harder for them to grow. Oftentimes, if something grows really quickly and really well, it doesn't necessarily mean it's concentrating flavor.
Yeah.
So it's often better if at least it's coming out of a slow growing stage rather than just kicking ass all day long kind of thing with its growth.
Yeah. When we originally went to this honeybush farm, we were about 20 kilometers, kind of as the crow flies, from where they told us the farm was. And so we called them and we said, okay, we'll see you in about, a half an hour. And they said, where are you right now? And we told them where they were, and they were like, you mean about an hour and a half? And it was this winding single track dust road, sheer drop,
high elevation,
up. I gotta say, I might have cried a couple times on the way there from fear. And you meet another vehicle. One of you has to back up.
Oh my God!
Down this kind of single track road. But it was worth it. When we came to the honeybush farm, it was just this oasis valley, and then they took us up into where they harvest the honeybush, and it's basically just like 4,000 hectares of land where just these honeybush plants just naturally grow. So
cool.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
they do the same. They do the same.
So there are other
oxidation
plants,
process.
and honeybush is probably the main other plant that is being processed in a similar way and achieving some awesome results.
That's right.
Is there more that you would like to discuss? I was going to open up to question and answer, but I don't want to miss any final
Let's see.
major points that you wanted to.
Did I have anything else? Yeah, no, not really. I think we pulled it all out
Amazing.
as we were talking. Everything I wanted to share. So yeah,
Wonderful.
open to questions. Absolutely.
Do we have any questions for Lovena about Rooibos and these oxidation processes? Yes.
The enzyme that you're talking about, that's in the plant already, or is it like something that's added to that process?
Yeah, great question. No, so there's nothing that's added. So I believe it's like aspalathin is the active enzyme in this Aspalathus linearis, which is the plant, the Rooibos plant, and so it just naturally turns red when chipped and crushed and left overnight, effectively. Left for a period of time.
And for our viewers, the question was, is the enzyme added, or was it pre-existing in the plant? And so I'm repeating that backwards, but the answer just there, that it's something that's already inside, and it's just a bit of a management of that, isn't it? I like to talk about enzyme management, and like how long do you let it do its magic, and at what sort of speed, and that's going to also be a huge participant in flavor development. So, Any other questions? Okay, go for it.
You mentioned that there's a whole bunch of different varieties of Rooibos. So is there only one variety that is generally farmed?
So may I repeat the question?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is you mentioned earlier was that there's many different varieties of Rooibos, but is just one variety that's farmed?
Yeah, so actually for Rooibos, there is only one Rooibos, but there's many fynbos. Fynbos is just the same species of plant, so honeybush is also a fynbos. And so fynbos basically are these like low-lying shrubs. So just like here, we have a forest, and in the forest, there's cedar trees, there's pine trees, there's maple trees, spruce, hemlock. In South Africa, there is no forest. The forest is all these shrubs that are small, medium, large, and these shrubs make up this dense biodiversity that we find in this Cape Cape Floral kingdom, of which all these varieties of fynbos belong. And so there's 12,000 varieties of fynbos. So like I say, it's one of the most biodiverse regions in the whole world. It's just the tip of South Africa.
Very cool. Yeah, and I want to just end saying that I'm personally super interested in this because I think there's so much opportunity to, say, use some local botanicals and apply similar techniques that you see in Rooibos production or you see in tea production, and it'd be so interesting to just explore this kind of flavor development. And I've had some fireweed. There was actually a fellow who used to have his wares here at the Tea Festival Revival a number of years ago that was just fantastic. Requiem teas. I don't think it is going any longer, but it was great to see him take fireweed and do similar enzymatic oxidation processes as you see for green,
I tasted
red.
that too.
Very cool, right? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I think that it's getting more and more popular in Scandinavian countries too again. So some really great potential, I think, that people can draw from these historical processes that you see in tea and that you see in Rooibos. So I really appreciate your knowledge sharing and that
thank
you've joined
you.
us today. I'm super grateful that you made this time. So thank you, Lovena.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Awesome. And then
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. That was fun.